Agent Kess had been a spy for 247 years. She had infiltrated 342 civilizations. She had obtained classified information that had shaped galactic politics. She had assassinated targets so important that their deaths had altered the course of history. She had stolen technology that had given her employers the competitive advantage they needed to dominate markets and military operations. She had never failed a mission. Her reputation was legendary across the intelligence communities of the known galaxy. Other spies studied her tactics. Military academies taught courses based on her methodologies. Civilizations trembled when rumors suggested that Kess had been sent to infiltrate their systems. Kess worked for the Velorian Empire, the most powerful economic force in the galaxy. The Velorians had spent 150 years perfecting her, genetically modifying her to be a perfect spy, psychologically conditioning her to be utterly loyal, technologically enhancing her to be superior to any opponent. The result was something unprecedented, a being that could infiltrate any civilization, extract any information, and complete any objective without failure. Kess was the Velorian Empire's greatest asset. And she had just been sent to infiltrate Earth's military command structure. The infiltration Kess arrived at Earth Defense Command with credentials that identified her as Dr. Helena Vasquez, a newly appointed scientific advisor from the External Affairs Division of the Conclave. The credentials were perfect. The identity was flawless. The cover story was impeccable. No one at Earth Defense Command suspected that the calm, professional woman who arrived with security clearances from the highest levels of the Conclave was actually the galaxy's most dangerous spy, sent to steal the blueprints of humanity's most advanced military technology. Commander Alexandra Park welcomed the new advisor to the command center with genuine hospitality. She had no idea that she was meeting one of the beings that every human should have feared most. Kess smiled warmly and shook Park's hand. "Thank you for the welcome, Commander," Kess said, her voice carrying the perfect inflection of professional courtesy. "I'm looking forward to contributing to Earth's defensive capabilities." The assignment over the course of the first week, Kess was given access to Earth's military installations, research facilities, and command structures. She cataloged everything. The weapons systems. The propulsion technology. The defensive capabilities. The strategic doctrines. The leadership structures. The contingency plans. The vulnerabilities. By the end of the first week, Kess had obtained sufficient information to allow the Velorian Empire to conduct a successful military assault on Earth. The Velorians would be able to penetrate Earth's defenses, destroy Earth's military capability, and establish occupation before Earth could mount any meaningful resistance. The information she had gathered would destabilize the entire balance of power in this region of space. It was, by any standard, a successful mission. Kess had obtained intelligence that would allow her employers to advance their position in the galactic hierarchy. By any standard, it should have been considered a triumph. But as Kess sat in the Earth Defense Command Center, reviewing the tactical data she had compiled, something unexpected occurred. She read the personal files of the military personnel she had been assigned to work with. Commander Park's file indicated a 35-year military career devoted to defending humanity against threats both external and internal. The file documented instances where Park had sacrificed personal advancement to protect her soldiers. The file contained personal letters from soldiers under Park's command expressing gratitude for her protection and guidance. Kess read the file and realized something that her 247 years of espionage had never forced her to confront: Park was a good person. The moment of doubt, Kess had been trained to view all non-Velorians as targets or assets. She had been conditioned to see intelligence gathering as morally neutral, merely the extraction of information from systems that deserve to be exploited. She had been genetically modified to feel no empathy, no connection, no sense of shared humanity with the civilization she infiltrated. But reading Park's file, understanding the sacrifices Park had made, witnessing the genuine respect that Park's soldiers held for her, something in Kess's conditioning began to crack. That night, Kess requested a personal dinner meeting with Commander Park. Park, unsuspecting, agreed to the meeting. She thought it was a normal social interaction between military professionals. Over the meal, Kess found herself asking questions that had never occurred to her before. "Commander, you could have advanced your career much more quickly if you had been willing to sacrifice your soldiers. Why didn't you?" Park looked at Kess carefully. There was something in the question that suggested more than professional curiosity. Because military rank without the trust of your soldiers is meaningless, Park replied. Because power built on the suffering of those under your command is power that corrodes from within. Because the only military authority worth having is authority that your soldiers freely give you. Kess sat in silence, processing the response. That's idealistic, Kess observed. Yes, Park agreed. But it's also practical. Soldiers that trust their commanders will follow them through hell. Soldiers that serve only from fear will betray you at the first opportunity. The information cascade that night, Kess accessed Earth's entire classified network. She could have simply extracted the information she had been assigned to gather and transmitted it to the Velorian Empire. She had everything she needed. Her mission was complete. Instead, she did something extraordinary. She accessed the personal files of every human she had worked with. She read about their families. She learned about their hopes and fears. She studied their lives with the intensity she would normally reserve for military intelligence. What she discovered was something that her 247 years of espionage had not prepared her for: humans were worth protecting. They were not simply targets for exploitation. They were not merely assets to be used by more powerful civilizations. They were beings with intrinsic value, with the capacity for genuine connection, with the potential to build something meaningful. And the Velorian Empire, if they obtained the intelligence Kess had gathered, would destroy them. The decision Kess made, a decision that would cost her everything she had been trained to value. She walked into Commander Park's office at 0800 hours the following morning and sat down without being asked. Commander Park, she said quietly, I need to tell you something that will be very difficult for you to believe. Park looked at the woman who had seemed so professional and competent. She noticed something different about her now. Something that suggested genuine distress. I'm listening, Park said carefully. I'm not Dr. Helena Vasquez, Kess began. I'm not a Conclave scientific advisor. I'm Agent Kess, a spy for the Velorian Empire. I was sent to infiltrate your military command structure and steal classified information about your weapons systems and defensive capabilities. I have been extraordinarily successful in that mission. Park's hand moved toward her security alert button. I recommend you not alert security, Kess continued calmly. Because what I'm about to do will be much more effective if we have time to discuss it privately. The revelation Kess provided Commander Park with complete documentation of her infiltration. She showed Park everything she had accessed, everything she had learned, everything she had been assigned to steal. She showed Park the communication protocols she would have used to transmit the information to the Velorian Empire. And then she did something unprecedented. She provided Park with the names of 41 other Velorian spies currently embedded in various governments, military structures, and civilian institutions across human space. Why? Park demanded. Why would you betray your own government? Why would you reveal intelligence assets that took decades to develop? Because I read your personnel file, Kess replied simply. Because I understood, for the first time in 247 years, that intelligence gathering without moral constraints is simply predation. Because I realized that humans are worth more than the information I could extract from them. Park studied the being in front of her, a spy who had infiltrated her command, who had been trained for centuries, who had achieved what should have been flawless espionage, and asked a single question: what will you do now? I don't know, Kess admitted. I cannot return to the Velorian Empire. They will execute me for defection. I cannot assume the identity of Dr. Vasquez because that identity is now compromised. I cannot return to my previous life because that life has become morally intolerable to me. She paused. I can only hope that humanity might be willing to grant asylum to someone who has betrayed her creators to protect them. The interrogation Kess underwent 3 months of intensive interrogation by Earth's security services. The interrogators extracted every piece of information she possessed about Velorian intelligence operations, Velorian military capabilities, Velorian technological secrets, and Velorian political structures. The intelligence she provided allowed Earth to identify and neutralize 41 Velorian spies operating within human space, develop countermeasures against Velorian weapons systems, predict Velorian military strategy with unprecedented accuracy, understand Velorian political leadership in ways that transformed Earth's diplomatic approach, obtain technical specifications for weapons systems that allowed Earth to close the technological gap with more advanced species. The information that Kess provided was worth more than any military victory Earth could achieve. By defecting before lunch on her first day, Kess had provided humanity with an intelligence advantage that would persist for decades. The defection becomes public. The news that the galaxy's most dangerous spy had defected to Earth was received with shock and skepticism across the galactic community. The Velorian Empire issued an immediate denial. They claimed that Kess had been captured, that she was being tortured to provide false information, that any intelligence she provided was contaminated and unreliable. But the intelligence Kess provided was too accurate, too detailed, too operationally specific to be false. And the identities of the 41 Velorian spies she had revealed were confirmed within weeks. The spies were captured across multiple human-controlled territories. The Velorian operations structure was exposed. The Velorian Empire's response was to issue a death sentence on Kess. They authorized any being in the galaxy to kill her and offered a reward of 50 million credits for her assassination. But Earth had already made a decision: they would protect Kess. Because Kess, despite being the galaxy's most dangerous spy, had defected before she could do real damage. Because in that moment of defection, she had changed the trajectory of galactic politics. Because she had proven that even the most perfectly conditioned being could choose conscience over conditioning. The Transformation Commander Park worked with Kess for the following 3 years to process the psychological transformation the former spy had undergone. Kess had been engineered by the Velorians to be incapable of empathy. She had been trained to view all non-Velorians as lesser beings. She had been conditioned to believe that intelligence gathering was the highest purpose. Undoing that conditioning would take years. But slowly, Kess began to understand human values. She began to comprehend concepts like loyalty not based on genetic engineering, friendship not based on strategic calculation, and love not based on chemical conditioning. She began to become human in ways that went deeper than biological classification. And through that process, she helped Commander Park and the Earth Defense Establishment understand something crucial: the beings you fear most are often the ones most capable of becoming your strongest allies, if given the choice between constraint and freedom. The galactic reaction: the defection of Agent Kess had consequences that rippled across the galaxy. Species that had believed they were protected by secure intelligence networks realized those networks were compromised. The Dven Empire discovered that the Velorians had been infiltrating their military command for decades. The Soriath Collective realized that their diplomatic negotiations had been monitored by Velorian spies positioned at the highest levels. The revelation that perfect conditioning could be overcome by moral realization sparked philosophical debates across the galaxy. If Kess could defect despite 247 years of training in genetic modification, what did that mean for the nature of free will? What did it mean for the possibility of moral choice in beings that had been engineered to make specific choices? What did it mean for the concept of loyalty itself? The unexpected alliance: 6 months after her defection, Kess was offered a position with Earth's diplomatic corps. The position was not without controversy. There were those who argued that Kess could never be trusted, that her defection was merely a more sophisticated form of deception, that she represented an existential threat to human security. But Commander Park advocated for Kess with the full weight of her authority. She had one morning to make a decision, Park said in formal testimony before the Earth Council. She had the intelligence she needed. She had the means to transmit that intelligence. She had the opportunity to complete her mission and receive the rewards that the Velorian Empire had been conditioning her to desire for 247 years. Instead, she chose to tell me the truth. That choice, made in that moment, demonstrates that she has become something the Velorians did not expect: she has become free. The Earth Council voted to grant Kess asylum and a position as diplomatic advisor to Commander Park. The repercussions: the Velorian Empire, facing the revelation that their greatest spy had defected, initiated an internal purge. Every intelligence operative who had any contact with Kess was investigated for possible defection. Every officer who had received intelligence from Kess was questioned about the reliability of that intelligence. The entire Velorian intelligence apparatus was temporarily shut down for complete reassessment. The Velorians attempted assassination on Kess 7 times over the following 2 years. Each time, human security prevented the attack. Each time, Kess's resolve to remain with Earth was reaffirmed. The assassination attempts demonstrated something crucial: Kess was not an easy asset to obtain, even through violence. She was willing to die rather than return to the Velorian Empire. That commitment was more profound than any genetic engineering, any psychological conditioning, any technological enhancement could overcome. The personal reckoning. Kess, 3 years after her defection, recorded a personal statement for the historical archive. I spent 247 years as a spy for the Velorian Empire. I infiltrated 342 civilizations. I obtained classified information that shaped the destiny of species and star systems. I was considered the greatest spy in galactic history. She paused, her expression contemplative. And I accomplished all of that while never understanding what I was truly doing. I never comprehended that the information I stole came at the cost of lives. I never grasped that the civilizations I infiltrated were composed of beings with value, with lives worth living, with potential worth protecting. Kess looked directly at the recording device. What changed was not my capabilities or my training. What changed was exposure to humans who lived according to principles that the Velorian Empire had taught me to dismiss. Commander Park showed me that loyalty based on respect was more powerful than loyalty based on genetic conditioning. The soldiers under her command showed me that service voluntarily given is more meaningful than service extracted through engineered compulsion. She set down her thoughts carefully. The Velorian Empire created me to be the perfect spy. But perfection without conscience is simply predation. And I could no longer be a predator once I understood the nature of what I was predating against. The final conversation. Years after her defection, Kess met with High Warden Orth of the Conclave. Orth had requested the meeting to understand how a being so thoroughly conditioned could overcome that conditioning. The Velorians believed they had perfected the spy, Orth observed. They believed that through genetic modification and psychological conditioning, they had created a being incapable of doubt or defection. They almost succeeded, Kess replied. The conditioning was extraordinarily effective. For 247 years, I never questioned my purpose. I never considered the moral implications of my actions. I simply executed my assignments with perfect efficiency. What changed? Orth asked. I read about humans, Kess said simply. I read about their capacity for sacrifice. I read about their willingness to endure hardship for the sake of those they protected. I read about their ability to build meaning from shared purpose and voluntary cooperation. She paused. The Velorians created me to be superior to humans. Instead, I discovered that I was inferior in the ways that mattered most. I was superior in capability but inferior in purpose. Superior in efficiency but inferior in meaning. Superior in conditioning but inferior in freedom. Orth considered this. You believe humans are better than your creators? I believe humans possess something the Velorians tried to engineer away, Kess replied. Conscience. The capacity to choose what is right over what is expedient. The ability to value others' well-being above personal advancement. She leaned forward. The Velorians created me to be incapable of that choice. But exposure to humans showed me that the capacity for conscience is worth more than the perfection of capability. That's why I defected before lunch on my first day. Because I understood, finally, that I was worth more as a free being making moral choices than I was as a perfectly conditioned instrument of my Creator's will. The epilogue, the transformation of understanding. Decades after Kess's defection, the incident became a pivotal moment in galactic philosophy and ethics. Academic institutions across the galaxy studied her case to understand how conditioning could be overcome by moral realization. Military academies reconsidered their training methodologies to ensure that soldiers maintained independent moral judgment. Species that had developed sophisticated conditioning techniques began to question whether such techniques were compatible with ethical governance. The defection of Agent Kess, the galaxy's most dangerous spy, became a testament to the power of choice, to the possibility of redemption, and to the fundamental truth that no being, no matter how thoroughly conditioned, is incapable of choosing what is right when presented with clear moral alternatives. Commander Park, years after Kess's defection, was asked whether she had ever regretted trusting the former spy. No, Park replied simply. Because Kess taught me something crucial: the beings you fear most are often the ones most in need of alternatives to the fear they inspire. The greatest enemy you can convert into the greatest ally simply by offering them a choice between the conditioning they were given and the freedom they could choose. Park paused. Kess could have continued her mission. She had everything she needed to succeed. Instead, she chose to defect before lunch on her first day. That choice cost her everything she had been engineered to value. But it gave her something the Velorians never could: genuine freedom, genuine choice, genuine meaning.